Let's talk to Helen Dale, who joins us for her weekly chat with me about what is going on in the big wide world of big tech. Helen, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, reasonably well. Battling through, looking out the window, seeing nothing at
Yes, it's
all
a bit
apart from.
grim.
It's very grim. I mean, it's always grim at this time of the year, but it's particularly grim at the moment, where we can't really do very much of anything. Hopefully, you're surviving in your neck of the woods. But it's been another interesting week, hasn't it, for international politics, for censorship, and for the continued march of big tech.
Well, yes, you've got a situation where you've got a few companies that don't have true monopoly power in an absolute sense, as in they don't control 100% of the market, but they tend to control more than 25% of the market.
Yeah.
And that's traditionally the level at which regulators dealing with competition law tend to start looking at an entity to see whether it exercises too much power in a market and can engage in there's various terms in competition law, whether it's misuse of market power, whether they're part of a cartel, whether there's collusion, and all of these things have to be tested at trial. When it comes to what in America is called antitrust, but in the UK is called is the broad heading is competition law.
Yes. I mean, it used to be the Monopolies Commission that looked at stuff like this, but I think they've done
Yes,
away.
it did.
They've done away with that now. But if YouTube, for example, was a television company, I think it would be subject to the monopolies rules and regulations because there is really no rival to it.
Well, no, there's two little companies. One is called BitChute and one is called Rumble.
Yeah.
But they are very small. It's the same problem that you have with the companies that are rivals to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. There are several of them. I mean, the most famous one was Parley.
Yeah.
The company wanted it to be called, I think they had French directors or something. They wanted it to be called Parley.
Right.
But it was they eventually just gave up because so many Americans got onto the platform and insisted on calling it Parler. So, I mean, occasionally I get French people in my mentions, and I also had a Parley account. And occasionally there were quite a lot of French people on it, and they would get really grumpy that the name was being pronounced wrong.
I never thought of that. I looked at it. I looked at it, and that never occurred to me that it was originally a French company. But
yes, it's Parlez-vous. Do you speak?
Yes, no, I get that, but I never thought of it that way. But that's now just disappeared altogether. I saw somebody interviewing the head of Parler, which was quite a successful company and was quite widespread in terms of the numbers of people that were on it. It had a reputation for being right wing only. I don't know if that was true. I never opened a Parler account, so I can't say with any degree of exactitude what it was like.
Well, I had one, and I will say that there were two distinct ecosystems on Parley. There were the Americans, who were initially quite small and then grew enormously. But then there was also the UK and EU. And I mean, to give you an idea of how mainstream it was, there were UK MPs and French deputés, on there, with official accounts and putting out material from HMGov and from the Republic, the French Republic, completely standard boilerplate, exactly what you would expect on Twitter,
right?
And often the same material. And I certainly, with my account, you would put the same material out as I did on Twitter and not really change, because I don't change. I mean, I'm the same on every platform.
Right.
And the reason I used all these various different platforms, I have a Gab account as well, and I have a Minds account now. And the reason
I've heard a bit about Gab in the past few days. What is Gab?
Well, Gab is a Twitter analog as well. It's the same logic as Parley, and and the difference with it is that it was deplatformed as well in the same way as Parley, and lost access to a hosting company's servers. I don't know whether it was Amazon. I can't remember the details. It was a few years ago. And for whatever reason, they had a reasonable amount of financial backing. They actually went and bought their own servers. And there is still an account on Twitter, a Gab account. There is still a Parley account as well. I don't know whether either of them use them much, but they still have accounts to direct people to the service. But of course, Parley no longer exists.
Right.
And I don't think it will exist for a very long
I
time. Even if they win their antitrust case, you are talking about years before it, a year at least.
Well, again, I mean, because what comes back time and time again from those who would seek to shut down things like Parler is that they say, well, you know, these are private companies. It's not an issue of free speech. It's purely simply an issue of whether they wish to carry this particular app on their platform, and if they don't want to, then that's their privilege to do so. And that may well be a legal point that can be made, but the bottom line...
That is a legal point in the... I'm going to explain this now because it's worth understanding the difference. That is a legal point in the United States. It is standard US law. The First Amendment applies to the government, not to the private sector. One of the things I've had to deal with this week is terribly confused Americans not understanding why Merkel and Macron and previous to that, Ofcom were very critical of YouTube pulling talkRADIO's channel and said, this has nothing to do with us, that's them being idiots. You know, they put miles of distance between them. And I've had to explain repeatedly to Americans that your understanding of freedom of speech is different from that in the European Union and the United Kingdom, because the belief is in a country like Germany, for example, Merkel has been very critical of the Trump situation. I don't know whether she said anything about all the other smaller accounts that have disappeared, but there is the view in EU countries and here, because Ofcom has predecessors going back to the foundation of the BBC and the beginning of radio, that if you are going to make decisions of that type about constraining speech, it needs to be made by parliamentarians, whether they're in the House of Commons or the Bundestag or the Palais Bourbon in France. And Americans, and that can be anti-free speech as well, because if you get a big enough majority of politicians passing legislation, they can decide that certain speech is simply illegal. And the classic example is Germany, where don't you dare try to run out Holocaust denial in that country, you will be charged.
Well, do you know, there was interesting that there was a similar case in France. The other thing that goes on, and I think it happened quite a bit last year, was there was a migration of sorts to Germany by certain people with their Twitter accounts. They somehow managed to register them in Germany, thereby making themselves more easily available to go after those who were creating what they regarded as hate speech, because the German law apparently gives more protection to people than the law in the rest of the EU.
Yes, it does. I mean, obviously, this is not just the European Union. You need to be very careful and not just attribute things to the EU here, where it's individual nation states doing different things in different ways. Even had Remain won in 2016 and we still were a member of the European Union, the regulatory system for media, the ecosystem in the United Kingdom is still different from that in France and from that in Germany and so on and so forth. That doesn't stop the EU, though, from doing things to big tech. And if there is anybody that disciplines big tech and puts it back in his box, it's quite likely to be the European Union. The danger with that, of course, and we saw this with the copyright directive a couple of years ago, is the EU regulator, the regulatory powers of the European Union. It's not just enormously powerful. I mean, because you've got to remember the population of Europe is both larger and statistically wealthier than the population of the United States. So it's a behemoth, the European Union, in terms of its ability to regulate itself internally. It's not just huge and powerful, it's also clumsy. So try to imagine the King Kong, the Peter Jackson version of King Kong. This enormous gorilla with huge feet just stomping everywhere, all over everything. And the danger is, now you've got Merkel and Macron and the Commission and the European Union going, no, we don't like you doing that. You won't be doing it here because that should be a decision of parliaments or the Commission. Or the European Parliament, they'll come up with something. The danger is that they just flatten everything. Yes. Because it's so huge and powerful. And you then finish up with the breakup effectively the nationalization of the internet. It ceases to be global. It's different in America, it's different in Europe, it's different in the UK, different in Southeast Asia, as all the local regulators just take a chunk out of it.
Yes.
But to a large degree, you have to accept that they have brought this on themselves.
Yes. Well, they have. I was going to ask you, I mean, when did the purity, because they used to, I mean, the American view of the internet in its basest form was that basically everything should be allowed, from, you know, pornography to freedom of speech to almost anything, even really horrible stuff, on the grounds that this was the original kind of intention of those who invented the internet, to make it something which, if you didn't want to look at something, you didn't look at it, but you couldn't censor it. Whereas now, clearly, all of those big tech companies have taken a view that they want to censor Donald Trump, and they have.
I think it comes... I'm going to make an argument here that's previously been made by Douglas Murray, but it's something that I've thought of myself independently. And he made it in the Mail on Sunday, and it's a very good point, is that a lot of the people who finished up with enormous power in these technology companies, to put it unkindly but accurately, were the people that nobody wanted to dance with at school.
True.
And so they had minimal social skills, minimal understanding of the way the rest of the world worked. And so they had this utopian tech vision about everybody all speaking at once. And then when they were placed in they didn't see this coming, basically, that they were going to be so powerful and so rich. They then were being forced in 5 minutes, effectively, but certainly in a very short period of time, only a couple of years, to do all the thinking that the traditional press and broadcasters and their relevant regulators, particularly with broadcasters, because the spectrum is limited, that's why you have regulation, they were having to reinvent the wheel when the traditional media had to think all of these issues through and work them out about who got to speak, when they spoke, how they were policed, how you exercised editorial control, what you had to keep out of your newspaper or off of your radio station or off of your TV station. Things that were developed with the press, but even to a degree radio as well, over centuries. And where there were a lot of errors and mistakes along the way. I mean, to this day, you will get some early modernists who blame the printing press for the wars of religion. Yeah. And then you will get other early modernists saying, no, that you're overclaiming. The pamphleteers didn't cause the wars of religion. And then you get people who will pursue a middle path and say that the printing press was a catalyst and not a cause, you know, and in chemistry, a catalyst speeds up the reaction, as everybody who's done a chemistry O-level knows. So basically, you've got people with very limited social skills who didn't have a good time at school. I mean, that is the overwhelming experience when you talk to a lot of these tech nerds, regardless of their politics. You know, they had an awful time at school because they were not the normal kids. But they were very clever at this one thing, and they've made an enormous amount of money out of it. And now they don't know, it's like, you know, giving a little child an enormous firework.
Yes. Well, it's incredible.
It's
incredible how powerful that they have become, and it was only relatively recently that people worked out that with Facebook, it was actually we that were the not the customers, but we were the product, and that they were actually making money from the individuals that were signing up to Facebook, who thought they were signing up for something which was free, and who didn't realise that actually their data was being used for all manner of profiteering around the world.
And that is why I'm now going to, because it's a commercial station and not the BBC, I'm going to make a little recommendation. There is a Facebook analogue, and I have opened an account on it, called Minds. And it's based on the blockchain, which is what Bitcoin uses. Yeah. And yes, you can be paid in Bitcoin for using Minds. Yeah. And that's fine, that's great. Open a Bitcoin wallet, and if you become popular, you might make a bit of money out of Bitcoin on it. That's fine. But that's not the main basis of Minds. The rationale behind it is to stop the data mining that Facebook does. Right. Because overwhelmingly, you see, when you get these congressional hearings, Democrats and Republicans, because at various times, Democrats have made complaints in the area of what Americans call antitrust, about
Yeah.
anti-competitive behaviour in the past, and said that these companies need to be broken up. It's like the railways, the railroads, or Bell. They're just too huge, and they're just crushing everything else, and Parley is just an example of it. Democrats have made these arguments in the past. But you get the questions from Congress critters, I'm going to call them, where they clearly don't understand how your data can be monetized.
Yeah.
And
true.
they don't grasp that it's not free. You're actually paying. You're paying in personal information about yourself.
Exactly. And of course, what they will say, Helen, though, is if you don't like it, then just don't sign up to it. Because when you sign up to it, we all click the box that says I've read the terms and conditions without reading the terms and conditions because they're too long. They do that classic thing of making sure that when they update your Apple iPhone and say we've changed our terms and conditions, nobody reads that. Nobody cares. You don't notice.
Yes,
you don't notice. I had the same thing with my bank. You know, I get an update once a year from the bank. I didn't realise until I lost my iPad that they'd stopped covering it for insurance. They were only now covering the phone. And I was like, well, when did you do that? And they said, well, it was in your terms and conditions that we sent you in February, which was about a million pages long.
I have to confess I'm one of these terrible, sad people, but then I am a lawyer who has not only read the terms and conditions for everything like that, but has occasionally had a hand in drafting things like that.
Well, listen, I take my hat off to you.
And yes, they are designed to build a legal wall around the company to make it very hard to litigate.
Yeah.
And in the context of this antitrust legislation litigation in the United States, where Parley has brought a claim against Amazon, I guarantee you that whatever Parley signed up to, unless they had very good lawyers willing to go through those contractual terms line by line and particularly go through the warranties, and this is notorious in corporate law. People will not read their warranties. I remember having clients when I was a corporate practitioner, and I'd be on the phone to them and going, did you read the warranties, which is what you've undertaken to do for the other side? Oh, I might have glanced at them, which was just code for no, I haven't read the warranty, so I have no idea what I've promised to the other side. And it's entirely possible that Parley, when it's signed up to be on Amazon's servers, has done the same thing and simply just signed up to everything and really put itself in a disadvantageous position, even though it looks like, according to Glenn Greenwald, it looks like a classic antitrust case. But until all those contractual documents are discovered and filed in court and lawyers can read them, God knows what they signed up to. God knows.
That is the problem, isn't it, Helen? And sadly, we're pretty much out of time, but we will discuss this more, I'm sure, because it's going to go somewhere. It can't stay where it is. I think no matter what happens in the next few weeks and months, we will end up with a very different sort of media landscape, social media landscape. Anyway, Helen Dale, thank you very much indeed. Writer, lawyer, political commentator, of course, as well. The bottom line for me here is that it would be great, would it not, if there was competition, if there was a place to go, if YouTube, for example, decided to ban Donald Trump. I mean, he did, as I say, manage to put a video out yesterday on the White House Twitter account, which, as far as I know, is still there. Because it seems ludicrous, does it not, considering that such a big portion of people get their views and their news now from social media. I think 9 million people have watched the Donald Trump video that was put out yesterday after the impeachment process. And surely that, in this day and age, cannot be banned. You cannot ban somebody from accessing, who is the leader of the free world, effectively, social media. It's bonkers.